Hello, my name is Esperanza. I'm here today at the David Brower Youth Center here at Berkeley with Professor Don Kammen. He leads the Energy and Resources Group at the Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, and he's pretty much a rock star. We're here today at the Innovating Energy Access for Remote Areas Discovering Untapped Sources Symposium. Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. And actually, the Energy Resources Group is its own unit as well as the Goldman School. So I have a joint appointment, one really based around sustainability, one really based around energy and public policy.
Like I said, a rock star. Now, let's get to this conference. Why don't you tell us a little bit of the change makers and pioneers in this room?
Well, this is a very exciting time because groups like mine, there's a very strong group at the Technical University of Berlin. There's people here from Masdar in Abu Dhabi. There's a really exciting group at the University of Oslo that they have a very large field program in Kenya on off-grid systems. And these are the kinds of groups that both open up new horizons. They do projects with brand new technologies. They develop software to record the rates and do the billing, and they also are some of the most engaged researchers with communities. So they don't just write papers, they really do projects. They work with ministries of energy, with non-governmental groups. They demonstrate that you can do what I would call use-inspired basic work on clean energy systems.
Fantastic. Now, you have done some research. Well, you have done a lot of research that has your name,
Sorry.
at least beyond this conference.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit more about your focus on uh, delivering energy access in
Well, I
these
got
remote regions.
yeah, I got my start doing energy work in Nicaragua when the U.S. was embargoing the country. So it was challenging to get there. Electronics were all being blocked by the U.S. government. You couldn't bring things in. So we worked on rural decentralized energy back in the late 1980s. And so we've been working on distributed energy projects for a very long time in Nicaragua, in East Africa, in West Africa, Malaysian and Indonesian Borneo, in the Arctic, in both Norwegian Arctic and in U.S. Alaskan Arctic. And all those small distributed energy projects are about half of what our lab does. We tend to work on what makes systems robust, what makes them meeting people's needs, how do you most support users. But then my lab also works on large scale energy systems. We build models of the U.S., the Chinese energy grids, the East African grid, the Chilean grid. So very large systems where we're trying to find out what will it take to drive all of the carbon out of those systems. In places like California, where we price greenhouse gases, it's not so difficult. It's going to take a while. But in places like Chile and East Africa, it really has to be much more about quality of service, security of service today, because they don't have a environmental mandate in terms of the policy. Kenya, it turns out, does, but it's a new development, and they really move things along. So we try to work back and forth on all of these.
You've worked a lot in developing region. Yesterday, you brought up a good point in your talk about how the poor could possibly potentially be exploited from getting access to these essential needs like energy, and they spend much of their income in them. Can you explore a little bit more on that?
Yeah, this is a real concern because the excitement about energy services for the poor, reasonably enough, has a commercial component. Many of the people who invest want to make money, they want to do projects. But one of the observations that's become very compelling is that the poor pay a great deal of money for every kilowatt hour. Where we work in Kenya, the price per kilowatt hour can be up to a US dollar. I pay 11 cents in California. In fact, I pay less than that because when I installed solar on my rooftop, the state supported it. So my cost is less than a tenth what a poor person costs in Kenya. That's just not fair. I obviously have a much higher degree to pay, but we subsidize these programs in places like California and Germany. And that's good because we learn, we get technologies in the field. But the real problem, though, is that we have to find a way to do things so that the companies stay in business, but they're not making money on the backs of the poorest people. And we're seeing places today where, unfortunately, that's still true.
So, how could you achieve sustainable energy access for all in a way that does not exploit?
Right. Well, there's no single solution because it varies where you go. But certainly, one thing that's compelling is that if you add up the other benefits of rural electrification in terms of health and local business and education, that if you're willing to expand your economic definitions, these programs can be very profitable to the central government because they're not having to subsidize rural communities with so much logistics to bring health and medicines, and the communities can really have an economic stake in things. So that makes a lot of sense. It works well, but you still have to find someone, a government that's willing to say, we're not just going to use the shilling or the RMB or the local currency as the only metric. They have to expand that to reflect health, job creation, and other things. And that's been a challenge. In the US, in Germany, in Japan, it's still hard to do those calculations. And so we have a lot of work to do to value poor people the same way we currently subsidize rich people.
Last question. I know that you don't have a lot of time. We people can find out what you do online, but could you share with us why you do what you do?
Well, I'm a physicist by training, and physicists do have a long tradition of getting their feet wet in public policy. President Obama's current science advisor was the person who occupied the faculty position that I now have before he left Berkeley to go to the East Coast and go to the White House. So there is a tradition of physicists in this area. But for me personally, it's really more direct. I'm interested in basic research, but I'm also interested in seeing a change. And so when I was a physicist working on astronomy, I could observe things, but you couldn't do. So in some ways, I was more interested to be an astronaut than an astronomer. And so this kind of work is a nice version of doing, not just observing.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hope we take care
Very
of
good.
that spring fever.
Yes, that's why I'm. Yep. Oh, you have something too. So thanks a lot.
It's a Berkeley thing.